You think your grandmother's 1950s kitchen was a sanctuary of safety and innocence? Think again. What seemed perfectly normal on her dinner table would actually horrify a modern health inspector and could land you in federal prison today.
Lamb burgers with all the trimmings will go a long way to satisfy the most critical group of guests.
From milk preserved with cancer-causing formaldehyde to glowing health drinks infused with actual radium, we are uncovering the barely controlled danger of the American home. These aren't just old habits. They are now classified as serious food safety and wildlife crimes. Tonight, we're dragging these 30 illegal secrets back into the light before they are buried forever. She broke the law to feed 8 people on less than you spend on a single cup of coffee today. These weren't just crimes, they were survival engineering. Grandmother purchased raw, unpasteurized milk every Wednesday morning in 1952, desperate efficiency. She stored 2 glass-gallon jugs in the Frigidaire icebox, poured it into aluminum pitchers each breakfast, served it to 6 children daily without boiling. The kitchen featured cracked linoleum floors, a porcelain farmhouse sink, floral wallpaper peeling at corners, cast-iron trivets, metal bread boxes. The milk was sweet, creamy sharp with bacterial tang starting by day 3. The cream line was thick yellow separated, floating at the top like custard. It cost 65 cents per gallon in 1952, fed 6 people for 3 days, equivalent to $8.50 today. It proved your ability to source cheaper alternatives when pasteurized store milk meant choosing between milk and meat for the week. Raw milk vanished when federal health inspectors cracked down in the mid-1950s, and pasteurization became mandatory licensing requirements instead of optional farmer practice. The habit that once proved resourcefulness under economic pressure became evidence of child endangerment, something people deny their grandmothers ever risked when modern food safety laws classify unpasteurized dairy sales as criminal negligence, punishable by federal fines. Mother canned pork shoulder every Saturday in 1953, survival-driven necessity. She boiled 12 mason jars in a massive enamel pot on the gas stove for 3 hours, packed raw meat with salt and lard, sealed them with rubber gaskets and metal lids. The kitchen featured yellow Formica countertops, a wall-mounted can opener, checkered curtains, tin canisters labeled flour, ceramic mixing bowls. The canned pork was salty, fatty, gelatinous, with grayish-brown color resembling potted meat. The texture was stringy, soft, slippery when reheated in cast-iron skillets. It cost $3 for enough pork to fill 12 jars in 1953. Fed 4 people for 2 months, equivalent to $42 today. It demonstrated your willingness to risk botulism when buying weekly fresh meat meant falling behind on rent payments or utility bills. Home canned meat disappeared when the USDA warned that boiling water canning couldn't kill botulism. Grandfather slaughtered chickens every Sunday morning in 1951, strategic poverty engineering. He grabbed birds from wire coops, chopped heads on tree stumps with rusted hatchets, plunged carcasses into boiling water for feather removal, gutted them on wooden picnic tables. The backyard featured corrugated metal sheds, dirt pathways, clotheslines strung between fence posts, aluminum wash tubs, garden hoses. The fresh chicken was gamey, bloody warm with stringy muscle tissue clinging to bones. The smell was metallic, fecal sharp from intestinal spillage during gutting. It cost nothing but feed. 1 chicken fed 6 people Sunday dinner, saving roughly $1.25 weekly, equivalent to $17 today. It signaled you understood that buying butcher chickens meant wasting money when you could raise and slaughter your own protein. Backyard slaughter vanished when city zoning boards banned livestock in residential areas during the late 1950s, and commercial poultry became the sanitary standard instead of home processing. Mother sold home-canned tomatoes and pickles every Saturday at church bazaars in 1954. Desperate innovation. She packed 30 mason jars weekly with garden vegetables, hand-wrote paper labels with string ties, sold them for 50 cents each from folding card tables. The church basement featured concrete floors, fluorescent tube lighting, long folding tables covered in vinyl tablecloths, hand-lettered price signs. The canned tomatoes were tangy, acidic, mushy, with seeds floating in thick juice. The pickles were salty, vinegary, crunchy, with dill seed coating each spear. Each jar cost 23 cents in ingredients in 1954, sold for 50 cents, equivalent to $7 today profit margin. It proved your ability to generate supplemental income when husband's factory wages couldn't cover school clothes or winter heating oil. Unlicensed food sales disappeared when state health departments began requiring commercial kitchen licensing in the late 1950s, and cottage food laws criminalized home sales instead of informal commerce. The entrepreneurship that once demonstrated resourcefulness became evidence of unlicensed food service, something modern health departments classify as misdemeanor charges requiring immediate sales cessation and potential product recalls. Grandmother kept eggs in wire baskets on kitchen counters throughout 1952, survival engineering. She collected 3 dozen weekly from backyard hens, wiped them with damp rags, stored them beside the stove for 4 weeks, cracked them, only after sniff testing each one. The kitchen featured speckled linoleum countertops, a white enamel gas range, wire egg baskets, ceramic canisters, embroidered tea towels. The room temperature eggs were sulphurous, runny, watery, with yolks that broke easily during frying. The smell was faintly ammonia-sharp after week 3 of counter storage. They cost nothing. Fresh eggs daily for a month, saving roughly $2 weekly at stores, equivalent to $28 today. It demonstrated your refusal to waste limited icebox space when eggs naturally preserved themselves through unwashed protective bloom coating. Room temperature egg storage disappeared when refrigeration became standard kitchen equipment in the mid-1950s, and USDA guidelines mandated cold storage instead of counterkeeping. These first 5 kitchen habits weren't just old-fashioned cooking methods, they were survival engineering designed to stretch every dollar when one mistake meant falling behind on rent or choosing between food and heating fuel. They required knowledge of fermentation, preservation chemistry, and bacterial risk assessment that younger generations dismissed as dangerous ignorance or reckless poverty. The next 5 represent even heavier strategic poverty engineering, practices that transformed potential contamination into extended shelf life when refrigeration space meant rationing every cubic inch. Mother prepared potato salad every Saturday morning in 1955. Desperate efficiency under judgment. She boiled 10 pounds of potatoes, mixed them with store-bought mayonnaise and chopped eggs, packed the bowl in wicker picnic baskets, left it sitting in July heat for 6 hours during church picnics. The picnic grounds featured wooden pavilion tables, checkered tablecloths, mason jars of sweet tea, paper plates, aluminum serving spoons. The potato salad was creamy, tangy, warm with mayonnaise, separating into oil slicks after 4 hours of sun exposure. The texture was mushy, slippery, loose, with eggs turning grayish-green. It cost $1.40 in ingredients in 1955, fed 20 people at church gatherings, equivalent to $19 today. It proved your ability to contribute substantial dishes when bringing store-bought alternatives meant admitting you couldn't cook or manage household budgets. Unrefrigerated potato salad disappeared when food safety campaigns warned about mayonnaise spoilage in the late 1950s, and coolers with ice became the mandatory standard instead of room temperature transport. The dish that once demonstrated generosity and cooking skill became evidence of salmonella risk, something modern health departments classify as temperature danger zone violations requiring immediate disposal after 2 hours. Grandmother washed raw chicken under cold tap water every Sunday in 1953. Survival-driven necessity believed to remove contamination. She placed whole birds in porcelain farmhouse sinks, rinsed them thoroughly for 5 minutes, splashed water across countertops and dish racks, patted meat dry with cloth towels reused for dishes. The kitchen featured white subway tile backsplashes, chrome faucets, wooden drain boards, hanging dish towels, open shelving. The washed chicken was cold, slimy, slippery, with pinkish water running into sink drains. The smell was faintly metallic, gamey clean, like wet feathers and raw poultry. It cost nothing, perceived as necessary sanitation, saving potential doctor visits if contamination occurred. It demonstrated your commitment to cleanliness when commercial processing plants seemed unsanitary compared to home rinsing rituals passed through generations. Chicken washing disappeared when USDA guidance in the late 1950s explained that rinsing spreads bacteria rather than removes it, and direct cooking became the safety standard instead of pre-wash rituals. The practice that once proved household hygiene standards became evidence of cross-contamination, something modern food safety experts classify as the primary cause of Campylobacter spread, requiring immediate behavior cessation. Grandmother saved bacon, grease, and lard in Folgers coffee cans every morning throughout 1954. Strategic poverty engineering. She poured hot drippings through metal strainers into 3-pound tins, stored them beside the gas stove for 6 months, scooped portions daily for frying eggs and potatoes without refrigeration. The kitchen featured a 4-burner gas range, speckled enamel pots, grease-stained stovetops, Depression-era dish towels, wire cooling racks. The reused lard was smoky, rancid thick, with burned meat particles suspended in yellowed fat like sediment. The smell was acrid, meaty, stale, intensifying after week 3 of room-temperature storage. It cost nothing. Waste transformed into cooking fat for 6 months, saving roughly $12 in butter purchases, equivalent to $165 today. It signaled you understood that throwing away usable fat meant wasting protein when grocery budgets meant choosing between cooking oil and school supplies. Mother fried chicken in week-old grease every Wednesday in 1956. Survival-driven necessity under economic pressure. She heated 2 quarts of darkened vegetable oil in cast-iron skillets, added flour-coated chicken pieces, fried them until golden brown crusts formed, strained the oil back into glass jars for next week's batch. The kitchen featured white metal cabinets, linoleum floors with cigarette burns, a grease-splattered stovetop, folded newspapers under the skillet, aluminum splatter screens. The fried chicken was crispy, oily, heavy, with coating that absorbed days of previous cooking flavors. The taste was smoky, bitter, burnt from accumulated carbon particles in reused oil. Grandmother kept butter in ceramic-covered dishes on kitchen counters throughout 1951. Desperate innovation to preserve limited refrigeration space. She left 1-pound blocks at room temperature for 2 weeks, covered them with glass dome lids, sliced portions daily with warm knives, never refrigerated them despite summer heat. The kitchen featured painted wood cabinets, tile countertops, a small icebox with limited space, ceramic butter bells, embroidered table runners. The room temperature butter was soft, spreadable, oily, with surface that turned slightly rancid yellow after 10 days. The taste was creamy, tangy, sharp, with cultured dairy flavor, intensifying in warm conditions. These first 10 kitchen habits weren't just corner-cutting, they were strategic poverty engineering that transformed every discarded resource into functional cooking materials when buying new meant falling further behind on bills. They required constant vigilance about bacterial growth, oil degradation, and temperature thresholds that food safety regulations now classify as criminal negligence. The next 5 represent even more intense, creative poverty engineering, practices that turned potential food waste into preserved nutrition when throwing away spoiled portions meant children went hungry. Mother stored ground beef wrapped in butcher's wax paper in the icebox for 5 days in 1952, survival engineering under economic necessity. She bought 3 pounds on Monday, left it in original wrapping, carved portions daily for meatloaf and spaghetti sauce, used the last gray-brown portions by Saturday. The icebox featured metal shelves, drip pans underneath, blocks of ice, wax paper packages stacked on top of each other, glass milk bottles. The 5-day ground beef was gray, slimy, sour, with surface oxidation, turning outer layers brownish-green. The smell was metallic, sulfurous, rotten, intensifying each day of storage. It cost 69 cents per pound in 1952. 3 pounds fed 6 people all week, equivalent to $9.50 today. It demonstrated your refusal to waste meat when buying fresh daily meant doubling grocery expenses and sacrificing other household needs. Extended ground beef storage disappeared when home freezers became common appliances in the mid-1950s, and same-day use became the safety standard instead of week-long refrigeration. The practice that once proved budget management became evidence of putrefaction risk, something modern USDA guidelines classify as exceeding safe storage limits requiring disposal after 2 days maximum. Grandfather made pork sausage in the basement every November in 1953. Desperate innovation without modern safety equipment. He ground 50 pounds of pork shoulder with hand-cranked meat grinders, mixed in salt and black pepper by feel, stuffed casings without thermometers, hung links in unheated cellars for 2 weeks of curing. The basement featured concrete floors, exposed ceiling joists, hanging meat hooks, metal mixing tubs, muslin cloths covering windows. The homemade sausage was fatty, spicy, dense, with white fat pockets throughout reddish-pink meat. The taste was salty, garlicky, smoky, with fermentation tang developing during cellar curing. It cost $4 for 50 pounds in 1953, fed the family through winter, equivalent to $56 today. It proved your ability to preserve meat through traditional methods when commercial sausage meant paying premium prices for inferior factory processing. Untested sausage making disappeared when trichinosis warnings intensified in the late 1950s and USDA temperature requirements became mandatory instead of traditional field-based curing. The craft that once demonstrated preservation expertise became evidence of parasitic risk, something modern health departments classify as requiring internal temperatures of 160 degrees and immediate licensing for any meat processing. Mother baked chocolate cream pies on Saturday afternoons in 1955, survival-driven necessity for Sunday church dinners despite lack of refrigeration space. She prepared custard filling with eggs and milk, poured it into pre-baked crusts, left pies cooling on kitchen windowsills overnight, served them 14 hours later. The kitchen featured double-hung windows with painted sills, lace curtains, wire cooling racks, ceramic pie plates, screen doors that didn't seal completely. The overnight cream pie was sweet, eggy, soft, with custard that stayed barely cool from night air. The texture was silky, loose, runny, with meringue weeping sugar droplets by morning. It cost 90 cents in ingredients in 1955, fed 12 people after church, equivalent to $12.50 today. It demonstrated your commitment to contributing impressive desserts when admitting you had no refrigerator space meant social judgment about poverty or poor housekeeping. Grandmother fed raw cookie dough to children every Wednesday afternoon in 1954, survival-driven treat that used eggs from backyard hens assumed safe. She mixed flour, sugar, butter, and raw eggs in ceramic bowls, gave spoonfuls to 4 grandchildren while baking, never considered salmonella risk from unwashed farm eggs. The kitchen featured wooden spoons, hand-crank mixers, metal cookie sheets, flour-dusted counters, children sitting on vinyl chair seats, watching. The raw cookie dough was sweet, buttery, gritty, with flour coating mouths like paste. The texture was soft, moldable, sticky, with raw egg binding everything together. It cost 35 cents in ingredients in 1954. Mother made chicken salad every Tuesday using leftover Sunday roast chicken in 1956. Strategic poverty engineering that stretched expensive poultry purchases. She shredded 2-day-old refrigerated chicken, mixed it with mayonnaise and celery, served it immediately on white bread, used every scrap including grayish meat near bones. The kitchen featured a small Frigidaire, Tupperware containers with warped lids, wooden cutting boards, dull paring knives, glass mixing bowls with chips. The 2-day chicken salad was tangy, creamy, cold, with meat that tasted slightly sour from beginning spoilage. The texture was stringy, wet, chunky, with mayonnaise masking off flavors. It cost $1.20 for original chicken in 1956, stretched into 6 sandwiches, equivalent to $16.80 today. It demonstrated your refusal to waste expensive protein when throwing away edible meat meant financial irresponsibility and hunger. Extended chicken use disappeared when food safety education programs warned about rapid poultry spoilage in the late 1950s, and next-day use became the maximum guideline instead of 3-day storage. The resourcefulness that once proved budget management became evidence of spoilage risk, something modern health departments classify as exceeding safe storage requiring disposal after 48 hours maximum. These first 15 kitchen habits weren't just risky shortcuts. They were desperate innovation under judgment that maintained household nutrition standards when every spoiled ingredient meant children went without adequate protein that week. They required strategic decision-making about bacterial thresholds, spoilage indicators, and acceptable risk levels that modern regulations now classify as criminal food handling. The next 5 represent even more intense, desperate innovation under constant observation, practices that challenged health regulations when one inspector's visit meant fines the family couldn't afford. Grandfather made head cheese in the basement every December in 1951, survival-driven necessity that used every part of butchered hogs. He boiled entire pig heads for 6 hours in massive steel pots, picked meat from skulls, including tongue and cheeks, pressed everything into loaf pans with gelatin from boiled bones. The basement featured concrete floors, coal furnace heat, metal folding tables, enamel pots large enough for heads, muslin straining cloths. The head cheese was gelatinous, fatty, dense, with gray meat suspended in cloudy aspic. The taste was porky, mineral strong, with organ meat flavors throughout each slice. It cost $2 for pig heads from local butchers in 1951, made 8 pounds of pressed meat, equivalent to $28 today. It proved your commitment to zero-waste butchering when throwing away heads meant wasting protein that could feed families through winter months. Head cheese making disappeared when younger generations rejected it in the late 1950s, and commercial cold cuts became the acceptable standard instead of home-pressed offal. The craft that once demonstrated butchering expertise became evidence of disgusting poverty food, something modern health codes classify as requiring licensed facilities for any head meat processing and immediate inspection protocols. Grandmother made blood sausage every fall in 1952, desperate innovation that captured every usable part during hog slaughter, including blood that most modern Americans find revolting to consume. She collected fresh pig blood in large enamel buckets during backyard butchering sessions, catching the blood as it drained from slaughtered hogs, mixed the still warm blood with cooked barley that absorbed liquid and provided bulk, added diced pork fat for richness and binding, seasoned the mixture with salt, pepper, and sometimes onions or spices, stuffed the blood mixture into cleaned intestinal casings using hand-crank sausage stuffers, tied off individual links with butcher's twine, and boiled the links immediately in large pots of water until the blood coagulated and sausages were firm enough to slice and fry. The entire process happened without health permits, inspection, or any regulatory oversight beyond grandmother's inherited knowledge of proper preparation techniques, passed down through generations of European immigrant butchering traditions. The backyard featured makeshift wooden butchering tables set up specifically for annual hog slaughter, large metal scalding tubs for removing hair from pig carcasses, hand-crank sausage stuffers clamped to table edges, clotheslines strung between fence posts for hanging stuffed casings to dry slightly before boiling, garden hoses providing water for constant cleanup of blood and tissue that accumulated during butchering process. The blood sausage was intensely dark, crumbly rich, with iron taste-coating mouths like licking metal. The flavor was mineral heavy organ meaty that some people loved for its intensity, while others found it completely inedible because blood's distinctive taste was impossible to mask regardless of seasoning. The texture was grainy, fatty, soft, with cooked barley, creating dense filling throughout the coagulated blood, and the sausage crumbled slightly when sliced because blood didn't bind as firmly as ground meat, requiring gentle handling during cooking. Father bought raw oysters from roadside stands every Friday in 1954, survival-driven tradition that risked contamination for affordable seafood when proper seafood markets charged prices working families couldn't afford. He purchased 24 freshly shucked oysters served in paper cups or wax-lined containers with rapidly melting crushed ice that provided minimal temperature control, transported them 30 miles home in the car trunk during summer heat without any refrigeration or ice replenishment, served them immediately upon arrival on saltine crackers with hot sauce and lemon wedges for Friday seafood dinner that met Catholic dietary requirements without breaking the budget. The roadside stands featured weathered, unpainted wood shacks set up temporarily during oyster season along coastal highways, hand-painted signs advertising fresh oysters in uneven lettering, metal buckets and barrels filled with oysters sitting in melting ice, large coolers that were inadequately iced and often sat in direct sun, and conspicuously no health permits, business licenses, or inspection certificates visible anywhere because these were informal cash operations run by local watermen who harvested oysters from unmonitored beds and sold them directly to passing motorists without any regulatory oversight or food safety compliance. The raw oysters were intensely briny, slippery cold with metallic ocean taste and chewy, firm texture that required aggressive chewing. The smell was seaweed, salty, sharp, with hints of low-tide mudflats and occasionally questionable notes suggesting the oysters came from beds near sewage outflows or polluted harbors that proper seafood dealers would avoid. The oysters slid down throats, leaving coating of sea brine and mineral flavor, and the texture ranged from pleasantly chewy when fresh to slightly mushy when oysters had been sitting too long in inadequate ice, with occasional gritty bits of shell adding unwelcome crunch. They cost $1.50 per dozen in 1954, fed 4 people Friday dinner meeting religious fish requirements, equivalent to $21 today. It demonstrated your willingness to source cheap protein and take calculated contamination risks when store-bought seafood from inspected markets meant paying premium prices that doubled or tripled the cost for oysters with proper refrigeration, harvest certification, and health inspection oversight that roadside vendors completely bypassed. Unregulated roadside oyster sales disappeared when hepatitis and other shellfish-borne illness outbreaks forced coastal health departments to require great-grandmother pickled eggs in vinegar brine every spring in 1953, strategic poverty engineering that preserved excess eggs from backyard hens through summer heat without refrigeration. She hard-boiled 3 dozen eggs carefully to prevent cracking, peeled them while still warm when shells removed easily, packed them tightly into sterilized gallon glass jars, covered them completely with vinegar brine made from white vinegar, water, salt, sugar, and pickling spices including peppercorns, bay leaves, and sometimes beet juice for color, sealed the jars with metal lids, and stored them in kitchen cabinets at room temperature for up to 6 months, serving pickled eggs at Sunday dinners and as quick protein snacks throughout summer when fresh eggs from molting hens. Room temperature pickled egg storage disappeared when botulism warnings intensified in the late 1950s, and refrigerated storage became the mandatory safety requirement instead of cabinet keeping. Health departments warned that low-acid foods, including eggs, posed botulism risk even when pickled, and that refrigeration was necessary for all pickled products regardless of vinegar concentration. Preservation method that once demonstrated food chemistry knowledge and strategic space management became evidence of anaerobic bacteria risk, something modern health departments classify as potentially dangerous, requiring refrigeration of all pickled egg products to prevent bacterial growth that acidity alone cannot completely prevent. Grandfather prepared lutefisk in basement washtubs every December in 1951, survival-driven Scandinavian tradition that used caustic lye chemicals for preserving dried cod through chemical transformation that modern food safety would classify as dangerous home chemistry. He purchased dried cod from specialty importers, soaked the rock-hard fish in lye solution, sodium hydroxide or potassium hydroxide, the same caustic chemical used for making soap and unclogging drains, for 3 full days in large metal washtubs set up in the basement, maintaining lye concentration that was strong enough to soften the fish, but hopefully not strong enough to cause chemical burns if splashed on skin. After 3 days of lye soaking that turned the dried cod into gelatinous, translucent mass, he rinsed the fish repeatedly for 2 days under running water, attempting to remove residual lye that could cause chemical burns if consumed, then soaked the rinsed fish in fresh water for 4 additional days, changing the water daily to complete lye removal through dilution. Finally boiled the resulting gelatinous fish that had been chemically transformed from preserved protein into slippery alkaline mass that bore little resemblance to normal fish. The basement featured concrete floors with floor drains essential for managing the large volumes of lye-contaminated water, metal washtubs placed on wooden sawhorses at working height, rubber gloves for handling caustic lye solution that could burn skin on contact, boxes of Red Devil lye purchased from hardware stores, clotheslines strung across the basement for hanging fish during various stages of soaking, and adequate ventilation because lye fumes could irritate eyes and lungs during the multi-day preparation process that filled the basement and entire house with distinctive chemical fish smell that announced lutefisk preparation to the entire neighborhood. The lye-cured lutefisk was intensely gelatinous, translucent, slippery, with texture resembling soap or jellyfish. The fish having been chemically broken down by lye until protein structure dissolved into quivering mass that jiggled on plates and slid down throats without requiring chewing. These first 20 kitchen habits weren't just extreme measures. They were final-stage poverty techniques that extracted functionality from literal animal waste, and caustic chemicals, when buying proper ingredients, meant choosing between household needs and survival. They required advanced knowledge of preservation chemistry, bacterial dormancy, and acceptable contamination levels that health inspectors now classify as grounds for immediate kitchen closure. The final 10 represent the absolute maximum desperation, practices involving toxic additives and regulatory violations that would guarantee arrest today. Mother served tomato sauce in hand-painted ceramic bowls every Sunday in 1955, desperate beauty standards that prioritized presentation over safety. She ladled acidic spaghetti sauce into colorful Mexican pottery bowls purchased from border town gift shops, let the sauce sit for 20 minutes while family gathered around the dining table, never knew lead glaze leached into food with every serving. The kitchen featured cracked linoleum floors, a white enamel gas stove, metal cooling racks, wooden spoons hanging from hooks, flour sack dish towels. The dining room featured a wood veneer table with chrome legs, vinyl padded chairs with tiers repaired using electrical tape, hand-painted ceramic serving bowls in bright yellows and oranges, paper napkins, aluminum serving spoons, a centerpiece made from plastic flowers. The tomato sauce in lead bowls was tangy, metallic, sweet with chemical aftertaste nobody could identify. The color was bright red, contrasting beautifully against yellow pottery with hand-painted designs. The bowls cost $2.50 each at border town gift shops in 1955, used weekly for years during Sunday family dinners, equivalent to $35 today. It demonstrated your commitment to attractive table settings when serving food in plain glass bowls meant admitting you couldn't afford decorative housewares that proved you maintained proper standards despite economic hardship. The lead leaching was invisible, tasteless beyond slight metallic notes, and accumulated in children's bodies over years of weekly exposure. Grandmother canned green beans in boiling water baths every August in 1952, survival engineering that ignored pressure requirements for low-acid vegetables. She packed 50-quart jars with garden beans, processed them in boiling water for 3 hours instead of using pressure canners, stored them in dark cellars for winter consumption despite botulism risk that could kill entire families. The kitchen featured massive enamel canning pots that covered 2 stove burners, wooden canning tongs with burned handles, cases of ball mason jars stacked in corners, boxes of rubber jar rings, metal jar lifters, steam fogging windows, and peeling wallpaper. The cellar featured dirt floors, wooden shelving sagging under jar weight, spider webs in corners, single light bulbs, temperatures that stayed cool year-round. The water bath green beans were gray, mushy, bland, with texture like overcooked baby food that dissolved on tongues. The smell was metallic vegetal flat from excessive processing heat, destroying all fresh flavor. They cost 50 cents in jar lids and energy in 1952, preserved garden surplus for winter months, saving roughly $15 in store vegetables, equivalent to $210 today. Mother cooked pork roasts by appearance alone every Wednesday in 1956. Survival-driven necessity that relied on visual cues instead of temperature equipment. She roasted pork shoulders until they looked done by browning, cut into meat to check pinkness using visual judgment, served dinners with centers barely cooked through, never owned a meat thermometer because they cost money and seemed like unnecessary modern gadgets. The kitchen featured a white enamel gas oven with unreliable temperature dial that was off by 50 degrees, cast iron roasting pans blackened from years of use, metal spatulas, pot holders made from flour sacks, grease-stained oven mitts. The dining table featured mismatched plates, aluminum forks with bent tines, jelly glasses used as drinking cups, paper napkins, a lazy Susan holding salt and pepper. The undercooked pork was pink, juicy, tender, with red near bones that seemed properly cooked by texture. The taste was sweet, fatty, soft, with texture that seemed done despite dangerous internal temperatures below 140 degrees. It cost $1.20 per pound in 1956. 3-pound roast fed 6 people dinner, equivalent to $16.80 today. It demonstrated your confidence in cooking experience when buying thermometers meant spending $2 on tools that seemed unnecessary for women who'd cooked for decades, relying on appearance and touch. The trichinosis parasites were invisible, microscopic, and caused fever, muscle pain, and potentially fatal complications weeks after consumption. Visual-only cooking disappeared when trichinosis awareness campaigns intensified in the late 1950s, and internal temperature checking became the safety standard instead of appearance-based judgment passed through generations. Health departments distributed educational materials specifically showing that pink pork wasn't safe, regardless of texture. The technique that once proved cooking experience and generational knowledge became evidence of parasitic risk, something modern USDA guidelines classify as requiring 145-degree minimum temperatures verified by calibrated thermometers inserted into thickest portions. Modern meat thermometers cost less than $10 and prevent thousands of foodborne illnesses annually, but older generations viewed them as proof younger cooks didn't trust their own skills. Grandmother stuffed Thanksgiving turkeys with bread dressing before roasting them in 1953, survival-driven tradition that trapped bacteria inside cavities during insufficient cooking times. She packed raw turkey cavities with bread, celery, onions, and sausage mixed in ceramic bowls, roasted 15-pound birds for 4 hours, served stuffing that never reached safe temperatures, while turkey meat overcooked to dryness. The kitchen featured a massive gas oven that barely fit the roasting pan, blue speckled enamel roasting pans inherited from her mother, wooden stuffing spoons, flour sack towels for handling hot pans, long-handled meat forks, basting brushes made from actual feathers. The dining room was transformed with extended table leaves, folding card table chairs borrowed from neighbors, good china used once yearly, crystal glasses from wedding gifts, linen napkins saved for holidays. The inside cooked stuffing was greasy, dense, moist, with turkey drippings soaking through bread cubes. The taste was savory, porky, rich, with onion and celery throughout, slightly pink-tinged near the cavity. It cost $3 for turkey and ingredients in 1953, fed 12 people. Thanksgiving dinner, equivalent to $42 today. It proved your mastery of traditional cooking methods when serving separate stuffing meant admitting you didn't know proper techniques passed through generations of family cooks. The salmonella bacteria multiplied rapidly in lukewarm stuffing that stayed below safe temperatures for hours while the turkey roasted. Inside bird stuffing disappeared when salmonella warnings intensified in the late 1950s, and separate baking became the safety recommendation instead of cavity stuffing that created temperature differentials. Home economists specifically demonstrated that stuffing cooked outside birds reached safe temperatures faster and more reliably. The tradition that once demonstrated holiday cooking expertise and connection to family heritage became evidence of bacterial growth risk, something modern food safety guides classify as dangerous practice, requiring stuffing temperatures of 165 degrees minimum verified with thermometers. Modern Thanksgiving guidelines recommend cooking stuffing separately in casserole dishes or using bread-based side dishes instead of cavity stuffing. Grandmother kept bacon grease in open coffee cans beside the stove burners throughout 1954, strategic poverty engineering that prioritized convenience over contamination prevention. She poured hot bacon drippings into Folgers tins immediately after every breakfast, left them uncovered beside burners for 6 months of continuous use, scooped portions daily with whatever spoon was nearby, including ones used for other cooking. The stovetop featured 4 gas burners with permanent grease stains, creating textured surfaces, chipped enamel that exposed rusted metal underneath, 3 coffee cans of various ages containing grease in different stages of rancidity, ceramic spoon holders, salt and pepper shakers with rice inside to prevent clumping, pepper mills. The kitchen smelled perpetually of old bacon grease, a smell so constant nobody noticed it anymore. The open bacon grease was amber-brown thick with food particles and dust settling into liquid fat over months. The smell was smoky, rancid, stale, intensifying near heat sources that kept it semi-liquid. It cost nothing, transformed waste into cooking fat indefinitely, saving roughly $8 monthly in shortening purchases, equivalent to $112 today. It signaled you understood that covering grease seemed pointless when you used it constantly throughout the day and lids just got greasy anyway, requiring more washing. The accumulated dust, insect particles, and airborne bacteria created contamination that caused digestive issues nobody connected to the grease. Open grease storage disappeared when health education campaigns warned about airborne contamination in the late 1950s, and covered containers became the sanitary expectation instead of open-air keeping beside heat sources. Home economists specifically demonstrated how uncovered grease collected airborne particles and developed rancidity faster near heat. The convenience that once proved efficient kitchen management and resourcefulness became evidence of contamination risk, something modern food safety experts classify as violation of covered storage requirements and immediate rancidity development. Modern recommendations require straining grease into covered containers, refrigerating it, and discarding it after 1 month maximum to prevent rancid fat consumption. Grandfather sold unwashed eggs from backyard hens at factory gates every Friday morning in 1951, survival-driven income that violated emerging health regulations. He collected 4 dozen eggs weekly from chicken coops behind the house, packed them carefully in cardboard flats salvaged from grocery stores, sold them for 35 cents per dozen from his truck bed, never refrigerated them or obtained permits from health departments. The factory parking lots featured gravel surfaces that created dust clouds, workers gathering during shift changes at 7 in the morning, cardboard egg flats stacked in truck beds, handwritten price signs on cardboard, cash transactions with no receipts or records. Regular customers knew to arrive early before eggs sold out, creating informal commerce networks. The unwashed eggs were brown speckled dirty with feathers and manure coating shells providing natural protection. Interiors were fresh orange yolked with thick whites that stood tall when cracked. They cost nothing to produce beyond chicken feed. Sold for $1.40 weekly, equivalent to $19.60 today, clear profit. It demonstrated your entrepreneurial resourcefulness when factory wages alone couldn't cover mortgage payments and medical bills for growing families. The unwashed eggs stayed fresh longer than washed store eggs because natural bloom coating prevented bacterial penetration, though customers didn't understand the science. Unlicensed egg sales disappeared when health departments began requiring seller permits and refrigerated transport in the mid-1950s, and informal commerce became classified as illegal food service instead of neighbor-to-neighbor trading that built community. Health inspectors specifically targeted factory gate sellers who operated without oversight. The income source that once proved self-sufficiency and entrepreneurial spirit became evidence of unlicensed food sales, something modern health codes classify as misdemeanor charges requiring immediate cessation and potential product seizure. Grandfather smoked bacon in basement smokehouse rooms every November in 1952, desperate innovation that trapped smoke in unventilated spaces for weeks of curing. He hung 40 pounds of pork belly on ceiling hooks, screwed into exposed joists in sealed basement rooms, burned hickory chips in metal pans on concrete floors for 12 days straight, created smoke so thick you couldn't see across rooms, and it seeped into upstairs living spaces. The basement featured concrete walls painted white, now yellowed from years of smoke absorption, exposed ceiling joists with heavy-duty meat hooks, metal smoke pans on concrete floors, no windows or ventilation fans, wooden doors sealed with weather stripping to contain smoke. The house smelled like smokehouse for weeks afterward, a smell that penetrated furniture and clothing. The indoor smoked bacon was intensely smoky, salty firm, with dark mahogany color. He hung 40 pounds of pork belly on ceiling hooks, screwed into exposed joists in sealed basement rooms, burned hickory chips in metal pans on concrete floors for 12 days straight, created smoke so thick you couldn't see across rooms, and it seeped into upstairs living spaces. The indoor smoked bacon was intensely smoky, salty firm, with dark mahogany color from concentrated smoke exposure over 12 continuous days. The taste was almost bitter-sharp, overwhelming from excessive exposure that modern palates would find inedible. It cost $5 for pork belly from local butchers in 1952, preserved 40 pounds through winter months, equivalent to $70 today. The smoke created fire hazards, carbon monoxide risks, and respiratory issues for family members living above. Indoor smoking disappeared when fire codes banned unventilated smoke in residential buildings during the mid-1950s, and outdoor smokers became the legal requirement instead of basement curing rooms that created hazards. Fire marshals specifically targeted homes with basement smokehouses after several fires. The preservation method that once demonstrated old-world expertise and self-sufficiency became evidence of fire hazard, something modern building codes classify as illegal smoke production requiring immediate ventilation systems and fire suppression equipment. Mother used well water straight from hand pumps for all cooking in 1953, survival-driven necessity in rural areas without municipal water systems or testing protocols. She pumped water into enamel buckets every morning using the cast-iron hand pump, used it for washing vegetables and cooking soup without boiling, never tested for contamination from agricultural runoff or septic systems. The kitchen featured a cast-iron hand pump at the sink that required priming with saved water, enamel water buckets with chipped edges, dipper gourds hanging on hooks for drinking, no filtration systems, wooden drain boards, metal dish racks. The well water was mineral metallic cold with sulfur smell in summer months when water table dropped. The taste was slightly rusty, earthy sharp from iron deposits and agricultural chemicals. It cost nothing, unlimited water supply from underground aquifer, avoiding monthly water bills equivalent to $30 today. It demonstrated your self-sufficiency when city water meant paying for utilities you couldn't afford and accepting government control over basic resources like water access. The untested water contained coliform bacteria, agricultural pesticides, and heavy metals that caused chronic digestive issues and developmental problems in children. Untreated well water disappeared when health departments began requiring water testing and treatment systems in the late 1950s, and bacterial contamination became the regulatory concern instead of accepted risk families lived with. County health departments specifically targeted rural wells near septic systems or agricultural fields. The water source that once proved rural independence and self-reliance became evidence of pathogen exposure, something modern health codes classify as requiring annual testing and immediate treatment if coliform bacteria detected. Modern well testing costs $150 annually and tests for bacteria, nitrates, and heavy metals, with contaminated wells requiring treatment systems costing thousands of dollars or connection to municipal water supplies. Door-to-Door Mother sold homemade bread and pies door-to-door every Thursday in 1955. Desperate income generation that violated emerging cottage food regulations. She baked 12 loaves of white bread and 6 fruit pies overnight in her home kitchen, wrapped them in wax paper while still warm, walked through neighborhoods selling them for 50 cents each, never obtained permits or inspections from health departments. The neighborhood featured single-family homes with front porches where transactions occurred, concrete sidewalks cracked from tree roots, mothers answering doors in house dresses and aprons, children playing in yards, cash changing hands on doorsteps with no receipts. Health inspectors specifically targeted door-to-door sellers operating without oversight. The entrepreneurship that once proved resourcefulness and hustle became evidence of unlicensed food service, something modern cottage food laws still restrict with sales limits, approved product lists, and labeling requirements. Modern cottage food operations require business licenses, food handler certifications, and adherence to approved low-risk food lists, with violations resulting in fines and business closure orders. Father transported prepared foods in car trunks without coolers every Sunday in 1956, survival-driven necessity for church potlucks and family gatherings despite summer heat. He loaded casseroles and salads into car trunks at noon, drove 30 miles through July heat with trunk temperatures reaching 100 degrees, served food 3 hours later that had been sitting in temperature danger zones. The car trunks featured spare tires, toolboxes, wool blankets, no insulation, metal surfaces heating in direct sun, cardboard boxes holding dishes wrapped in towels. The car was a 1952 Chevrolet with no air conditioning, black interior that absorbed heat. The trunk transported food was warm separated loose, with mayonnaise-based salads turning soupy and separated. The casseroles were tepid congealed dry on edges with centers still barely warm, creating bacterial growth conditions. It cost $2 in ingredients per dish in 1956, contributed to potlucks that proved social participation and community involvement, equivalent to $28 today. It demonstrated your commitment to community involvement when admitting you had no way to transport cold food meant missing social events and family gatherings that maintained crucial support networks. The bacterial growth in temperature-abused food caused digestive issues that everyone attributed to overeating rather than contamination. Uncontrolled food transport disappeared when coolers became affordable consumer products in the late 1950s and temperature maintenance became the expectation instead of room temperature acceptance that everyone tolerated. Church potlucks specifically began requiring cold dishes arrive cold after several illness outbreaks. The necessity that once proved community participation and social commitment became evidence of temperature danger zone violations, something modern health codes classify as requiring cold foods below 40 degrees and hot foods above 140 degrees during all transportation. Modern food safety guidelines require insulated coolers with ice packs for cold foods and insulated carriers for hot foods, with violations at public events resulting in food disposal and potential liability for illness outbreaks. These 30 kitchen habits weren't just outdated cooking methods or charming grandmother stories. They were survival engineering designed to stretch every dollar when one health code violation meant fines families couldn't afford, when one spoiled ingredient meant children went hungry that week, when one failed preservation batch meant winter without protein. They required advanced knowledge of bacterial dormancy thresholds, chemical preservation properties, temperature danger zones, and acceptable contamination levels that modern health inspectors now classify as criminal negligence, warranting immediate kitchen closure and potential arrest. The mothers and grandmothers who practiced these techniques weren't ignorant or reckless. They were calculating risk against economic reality when buying proper equipment meant choosing between meat thermometers and winter coats for children, between pressure canners and mortgage payments, between health permits and medical care. They understood fermentation chemistry, smoke curing, acid preservation, and cold storage in ways younger generations never learned because regulations eliminated the need for that knowledge. What once proved resourcefulness became shameful reminders of hardship families wanted to forget. The knowledge disappeared within one generation. Daughters never learned mother's preservation techniques. Grandchildren never understood the economic calculations behind every kitchen decision.